Hello, everyone. From fact to story, how can digital communications aid in the search for the truth, but also justice? My name is Lucy, and it's my pleasure to welcome you back to the America House virtual floor. America House Kiev is the main resource for American culture in the Kiev region. At America House, anyone can become a game changer. Creative Resilience in a Time of War is a series of webinars and streamed online discussions between Ukrainian and American creatives in design, advertising, and culture on the purpose and challenge of creative work in the context of global challenges and the war in Ukraine. Today's topic, True Stories, digital storytelling in an era of crisis. It's my pleasure to introduce you to our co-organizers, Izzy Chan, American strategist, filmmaker extraordinaire, and also Kirsten Hazard, also a strategist. Kirsten, I'm passing the floor to you to say a few words about tonight's panelists.
Thanks so much, Lucy. I am so pleased to introduce our extraordinary guests, Sarah Chudzinski and Michael Gonzalez. Sarah is a lifelong educator and social justice leader based in Washington, D.C., and has spent many, many years making an impact with nonprofits. Today, she is a U.S.-based leader of Dattalion, standing for Data Battalion, fighting on the information front lines of the war in Ukraine, enabling and empowering female photojournalists and data warriors. Michael is based in London and is an international communications expert with 30 plus years of experience across the globe. He's the Senior VP of Corporate Strategy at Clarity PR and has been leading the creative and strategic promotional efforts to get Dattalion and their incredible stories on the world stage. Sarah, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having us here today. I would love to pull up this slideshow here. So Dattalion started in the first days of the war when the incredible powerhouse female leads were noticing that the frontline images of what was happening on the ground in the war were not in mainstream media, were not getting out to the general public. And so Dattalion began pulling these images together into what is now the largest free aggregated database of images, eyewitness accounts, and other information from the front lines of the war. So we are a 98% women-led team with over 50 plus international volunteers. It takes a huge network of collaboration and support to make this happen, and it's a volunteer crew. So our mission is to create this archive. It's been over a year now. And we really want to keep the events of the war in historic perpetuity so that we all remember what has happened here, so that the generations to come know what happened here with no question. And to continue that, to be able to have the foundation to hold Russia accountable for their actions in Ukraine. So right now, you can see some of our images on these slides, images from the front lines of the war, documenting and keeping in this archive the actions of this horrific invasion and the impact that they are having on the people and the land of Ukraine. Within our database, we have aggregated over 36,000 photos in the last year plus and 5,800 videos. In our eyewitness accounts database, we now have over 200 accounts. So it's a pretty incredible archive collection, as well as an active place to be able to see what's going on in the war and to connect with eyewitness accounts. And a huge thanks to Clarity and their outreach and collaboration with us. We have 250 plus media appearances, which allows us to get these images, get these eyewitness accounts into the lives of people who are not at the front lines of the war. We co-organize, organize, collaborate with a huge amount of other organizations and people who are doing events to bring awareness to what's happening in Ukraine. We are currently featured in 3 documentaries with a number of requests in the works. And we have the wonderful support of Aspinall London, who actually has a charity keyring dedicated to raising funds to support Dattalion's team. Within doing advocacy and outreach, one of the wonderful things that we've been able to do is collaborate with Her Excellency U.S. Ambassador from Ukraine, Ukrainian Ambassador to the U.S., Ambassador Makarova, and I have had the pleasure of introducing her to a number of senators and congressional leaders here in the U.S. With the images from our database and our collaborating photojournalists. So one of the things that we do is we enlarge our photos from the front lines to 48 by 36 or 26 by 36 so that they are the size of your body, that you are faced with them and the realities of what's happening on the ground there. This is myself and Special Counsel to Ukraine for War Crimes, Eli Rosenbaum in DC just a few weeks ago. And this is the ambassador of Moldova to the US viewing Holly McKay's work from Bakhmut. And this is another avenue that we use the images for, which is actually in the Russell Rotunda on the US Capitol. One of the things that I think is so powerful about what we're doing within the creative work and storytelling of this war and the events that are happening on the front lines is bringing these stories into people's lives. These are real people. This is a photo by photojournalist Byron Smith from the border of Ukraine to Poland. And this is partners bidding each other adieu. And this is the last time that these two were together. And this photo always brings me to tears because this is real. These are real people's lives being impacted by this. And these stories are important and valuable. So to continue with these, we use our images and our database, our eyewitness accounts to connect with various organizations that are working on war crimes in different avenues in different ways. So we've worked with PILPG, we've worked with the Clooney Foundation, directly with the Minister of Justice in Ukraine. And it's important to us that these stories are heard, that the experiences of the people on the ground, of Ukrainians impacted by this, that they go as far as we can take them in terms of being heard and having the impact of creating justice, accountability, and creating a collective memory within this horrific atrocity. So we continue to fight. We continue to work on our team. You know, we're talking about creative resilience here today, and strengthening our core team of volunteers. We work on with wonderful collaboration from external organizations on our data collection methods, on revamping our database to make it more searchable and accessible. It is free and accessible on our website. On working with wonderful collaborators at Clarity to get these images and stories out to the world to be heard, continuing to find new ways to be advocates, partner at different events, get these images into the hands of people who make decisions and into constituents. So that's an important piece of what we're doing here. And it takes that network and that support of collaboration. You're welcome to find us anywhere on social media that works for you. We have our website, we have Twitter, we have Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, etc. So we hope that after today's session, we'll hear from many of you. We welcome your contributions to our database. We welcome you as a volunteer to our team, because it truly takes a global village to keep these truths, to keep these stories, and to grow this archive so that no one ever forgets and these truths remain in perpetuity. So thank you, American House, for having us today.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for providing this overview of what Dattalion does and what you do in your organization. I understand that some people might be a little bit surprised to see this topic within a general discussion about digital communications, but really a lot of the war that Ukraine is waging these days is a war for their hearts and minds, and a lot of that communication is happening in a digital world. And what you're doing is a clear example of that. At least it feels that way. Although your scope is much wider, as I understand it, for your work specifically in the U.S. Correct?
Yeah. And one of the things that I think is so key, and what inspired me to get involved with Dattalion and the team, is that this is a group of powerhouse women that came together to make this happen and said, okay, how can we fight this war with the means that are within our reach? How can we fight this war? And what came up was fighting it on the data and information front. And that is a huge part of this war. There's the physical aspect, and then there's keeping this awareness, educating everyone about what is actually happening on the ground. And that's a big part of the outreach from media and that storytelling piece.
Super. Thank you so much, Sarah, for getting our event started out today. We'll head to our next panelist, who will also be doing a presentation, but more about strategic and creative communications and how they can be used for furthering goals and advocacy and supporting organizations that are doing such important work, like Sarah's, like Dattalion, and a whole group of really passionate individuals of both Ukrainians and active citizens worldwide. Just a quick reminder before we head to Michael, that everyone who is joining us virtually today, you can also ask your questions or share your remarks, share your comments in the comments of the streams, and we will pass them and discuss them later on as we go into Q&A. So thank you so much, Sarah and Michael. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lucy. So slides, please. It's a real privilege and an honor to be able to speak here with you alongside Dattalion for obvious reasons. We've been doing work with Dattalion for just over a year, and it's like I said, it's been an honor to do so because of the cause that you champion, etc. I just going to tell a little bit about Clarity before I go into the experience that we've had so far in providing comm support for Dattalion, because as you can imagine, it's a very different experience providing comms for an organization who champions something like this, but also operates in this very unpredictable and chaotic environment. So we've had some real kind of interesting experience and learnings from that. But Clarity, we founded in 2013. It's a global comms and marketing agency with offices in most part of the world, either through our own offices and or partner offices. We like to work with organizations who make a difference, who has a real impact on how people live and work and how industries change. We have our mission is here. You can read it for yourself, but it's we really kind of provide that kind of genuine partnership to bring the most kind of their business challenges. How can we help organizations with their challenges? And also, we really believe in technology as a force for good. So I think what Dattalion stands for and how that organization has used its technology, as we heard Sarah talking about the data, etc. It's a brilliant example of the type of organization that we really want to support and have done so, as I said, for the past year or so. When you work with an organization like Dattalion and providing support, as I mentioned, it's a very different situation. You realize very quickly that you are launched into a world that is very tragic in many ways, for obvious reasons. It is chaotic. It is unstructured. It's very unpredictable. It changes by the day. Something that you have planned to do one day or 1 week changes because, again, the nature of the war is that it has that impact. So we have had to we work very, very closely with the key people at Dattalion to be able to be flexible enough and change and shift and provide the counseling, etc., on an almost real-time basis. So from a comm strategy, we've had to have a strategic part and a creative part. The strategic side of the communications part has been much around building the foundation, creating a long-term plan, supporting the long-term goals that Dattalion has, whereas the creative side has been very much designed around how do we tackle the challenges that we meet along the way. One of the big challenges, as you can imagine, in dealing with the media there's three big challenges, really. One is that it's most of the reporters who cover the story on the ground. So logistically, it's very difficult to get through to reporters because of their day-to-day jobs. Secondly, it's a very crowded space. There's an awful lot of stories about the war, and you are one part of that storytelling. So getting cut through to tell your stories is challenging because you're dealing with so many different facets of the war when you look at the war reporting. And then thirdly, after a while, you experience this concept of war fatigue, where there's been so much tragedy, so much hardship, so many hard stories to take that people get a bit of fatigue. So you need to kind of think differently. How about you tell your story? So that's kind of the challenge that we've had along the way. So if we start off with the strategic side, which is what I call here the foundation, some core areas that we've worked very closely with the Dattalion team around has been around the messaging, being able to help create that messaging, that call to action that we wanted to go out with. And this is a very delicate process because on one hand, of course, you have to have a message that is hard hitting, that it goes straight through to you, really speaks to you, but also doesn't frighten someone, because you need to get people involved. As Sarah said before, we want people to take action, to be part of that vision that we have, etc. So it has to, it's a delicate balance to have that dual impact in messaging. So that's something that we've worked very closely with the team on. Coaching key people. So someone like Natalia, for example, the founder, formidable person who regularly speaks at events, etc. Worked very closely with her to coach her on delivering these stories to a wider audience, all the techniques, looking at that from an audience perspective, making sure that the story resonates, and that audiences are influenced. Upskilling, we've worked with Dattalion staff to train them on using digital, for example, in the most effective way, giving guidelines around social media strategies, because at times you will realize that resourcing can be an issue. You might not have as many people as you thought or as you wanted to have involved in something. So again, giving those people the skills and the knowledge to do some of the job themselves has proven very helpful. And the strategic part was very critical at the very beginning of the campaign, as I said, to kind of build the foundation. But it is also something that runs through our work on a very regular basis, because messaging, for example, is dynamic. It changes. Although the core of the vision and the mission is there, as certain things change, new talking points are added, messaging needs to flex accordingly. So this is an ongoing process. The creative side, this comes back to some of those challenges that I mentioned before. How to deal with a media narrative, and how do we stay current? How do we stay relevant? How do we stay in touch with the media? And we had to do that through what we call kind of a pivoting strategy. So one of the approaches that we did was, when we realized that this media fatigue was very evident, we realized that we couldn't go out with the same graphic, hard-hitting stories that we'd done with the photographs and the story around see the real war, see the uncensored view of the war, looking through the lens of Dattalion to actually see what's happening. That's proved very impactful in the beginning, but then we in order to tackle that media war fatigue, we pivoted to what we call hope. So we went from tragedy to hope, looking at where was the light at the end of the tunnel. And we identified some of these cases. For example, a very touching story about a person who was a magician, and he went to different bomb shelters and did magic tricks to help people smile and get distracted. So we used that as a case study, and that enabled us to engage with to re-engage with some of the reporters again, because it was a different side of the war. It was something that was around hope and emotion, and it was that sometimes the media, what they really need is a counter narrative. So that's something that we did. We looked at data stories. So we looked at facts that could prove again this story of hope. So we looked at, for example, the number of businesses in Ukraine who were planning to rebuild their businesses, their buildings, their premises after the war, many obviously who tragically had been destroyed. And we found again that it was an astonishing amount of numbers who planned to do that. So there was a story around that very well-known resilience that Ukrainian people have, and so it was a story around hope and resilience, which worked well. I mentioned before Natalia, in terms of her formidable career, her personality, her passion, her vision. We started telling the Dattalion story through her career, so looking at not just what she'd done from a Dattalion perspective, but also all her other accomplishments. So we managed to we personalized the story again, and that worked. And then finally, moments in time. As we all know, the media is, whenever there is a momentum. So whenever there's a 1-year anniversary, of the war, or where it was International Women's Day, these are moments where, they function a little bit like a magnet. It draws attention to media and their stories. So we managed to get some good media coverage around, for example, International Women's Day for Natalia by using this profiling. So that's kind of how we are looking from a very ongoing creative. We keep on what we're doing. It's the drumbeat of news and pushing the story forward. But as I said, we have to have a very, very flexible approach to comms that balances this combination of strategic consultancy, short-term and long-term, with that kind of very, very quick pivoting to how we can respond and how we can deal with the media agenda in different ways. And we very quickly realized that this is a comms campaign that could not solely rely on media relations because of the challenges that I've mentioned, which is why a lot of the work that we've done with Dattalion has been around these other areas of coaching, upskilling, counseling, messaging, positioning, etc. Because again, the situation and the story is continually changing. So I think that's kind of where I will leave it. It's been so far an extraordinary, rewarding time for us. Truly honored to be able to support an organization like this who do such fantastic work. It is, as some of you maybe can relate to, sometimes when you wanted to support an organization that do important things, it can be slightly frustrating because you don't know how can you, apart from donating, how else can you really support an organization to impact and create change. And I think this is one of the areas where we feel we can, is that we are directly part of the organization in helping them. So it's been an extraordinary experience so far, and we long may it continue. So with the support that you have for us. So thank you very much on that. I'm very happy to take any questions that anyone might have around what I've just talked about.
Thank you so much, Michael. A lot of really interesting, but also very practical ways to approach a difficult topic, and how to work with the topic of communications, but also consider all of the components that come together. You spoke a little bit about the importance of, really, if you feel moved to contribute, there are lots of different ways that you can do that. But I was hoping that both of you could share how you actually ended up involved with the Dattalion project, and maybe working with the topic of Ukraine in general. Is there a personal connection? Like, why is this topic important to you? And maybe you can go first, Michael.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I had, in my very early career, I had the opportunity to work for Amnesty International. So, and I remember that being a very rewarding experience in terms of what they stood for, what they championed for. I was involved in various different campaigns. One was around women in prison, for example. That was one of the big campaigns that they had. So, and I was a press officer at the time. So, from early days, I found it very rewarding to be able to apply my skills and what I was interested in to a very, very worthy cause. So when we started to talk to Dattalion just over a year ago, and the horror of the war kind of just broke out, and we saw it's almost a responsibility, I feel, as a communicator, to be able to use your skills where you can, and for such an important cause. So for me, it was more of a question of why shouldn't I? Why shouldn't we? And then that's kind of where we are now.
Excellent. Thank you, Michael. And Sarah, what about you? I know that you have maybe not necessarily Ukrainian connection, but more of a perhaps background connection.
Yeah, so my family itself has been very touched by war, especially in World War II. My grandmother is one of 800 people that survived the Łódź ghetto. And 7 years ago, I had the opportunity to literally stand on the edge of the grave that she dug with her family, that by thin narrows of margin remains empty. And that impacted me when this full-scale invasion broke out. I was quite literally in tears for about 3 days straight. And when I was presented with getting involved with this project, it was a relief to be able to do something with everything that I was feeling, and with having that deep personal connection to war and what this does to people and to families around the world. I've had the opportunity to live in Poland, and to feel on a very personal level what it's like for areas in Central and Eastern Europe to continue to fight for their independence, to continue to fight for their right for democracy, and for the people to choose to live how they want. So on a very personal level, this is work within my heart. I couldn't not do something. So being able to be involved in this way, as Michael so aptly put, to be able to have an impact, to be able to amplify voices that need to be heard during a very trying time is so essential, and brought me right back on a cellular level to what my family has experienced, to my family members quite literally running from a war zone. I have my grandmother's cousin who has shrapnel injuries in her arm. So this is very personal for me, and I'm grateful for the outlet to be able to have an impact and to do something.
Thank you, Sarah. And thank you, Michael, for really being willing to immerse yourself in this topic, because as both of you said, it's not the easiest topic. It's not the easiest topic to work with, not the easiest themes to communicate when it's so difficult, but also so important to get the word out about these things. A lot of Ukrainians, they want to work with people, from outside, because it's important, again, to communicate. And I know, and everyone knows, that there's so many people in the world that are really not left, that feel a need to contribute in some way. Like you said, Michael, the question was, how could I not? Like, it's just how to find the way. Perhaps both of you could share, like, what would be the best way to do that, and maybe how you ended up. Was it a personal connection? Did someone invite you to partake? Was it a phone call or an email from someone you never met? Like, what is the best way to create these partnerships? Maybe if you don't necessarily have networks, or do you need to cultivate those networks to use them and utilize them in times of need?
Yeah, I think that in our case, it was personal connections, and I do think that personal connections is very important, because there's a lot of credibility there. Networking, just going out. But I think that maybe sometimes it also takes a bit of effort for people to just go out. And I mean, there is not a shortage of places and events to go to, generally, to create opportunities for connections around various causes, whether it's the war in Ukraine or other causes that needs to be tackled. So I do think that it probably requires a bit of initiative as well. And like I said, I think that there is an element of personal responsibility and accountability that you need to feel that if you have the skills, whatever that might be, it might be that you have skills in fundraising or in teaching or coaching or whatever it is, but to apply those skills to causes like this, because obviously, speaking from experience, I know that when you do that on a more active level, it's it can go a long way, and it's obviously great to see that there is financial donations and aid happening, etc. But it's when you start seeing people applying their skills and the impact that has on an organization, etc. I think that's where real change can be achieved. So I think that's probably where how I would look at it.
Super, thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Lucy, and thanks, Michael. I think that's exactly right, is creating that network, reaching out and getting involved. One of the things that I want to point out is, for example, Dattalion is a hugely volunteer-supported organization. And a lot of organizations right now are operating on the strength and the resilience and the energy of volunteers. So your time, your particular skills, whatever you have to offer is essential in coming together to collaborate. So reaching out to organizations that you're interested in, asking how you can get involved. I think that, and I think about myself in that, my background is as an educator. And so, of course, I'm creating these events, right, with these images, and we virtually bring in our eyewitness accounts so that people are having this experience and having this educational moment of what is happening on the war. And that's the skill set that I bring. Doing something like this, standing up in front of Congress and introducing an ambassador, is not something that was necessarily in my background. But because of my motivation, because I feel so strongly about speaking up and making sure that these stories are heard, that Russia is held accountable, that democracy prevails, there are risks that I personally take in terms of putting myself out there. So I encourage you to push yourself if you feel passionately about this, and reach out and get involved, because everybody's participation matters in this.
Thank you so much, Sarah and Michael. I want to continue on a point that you raised, that Dattalion is a hugely volunteer organization. And for example, the work that you do, Michael, it's based on your own, people volunteering their time, their creativity. That is not necessarily the most sustainable approach. People need to work. People need, to really just focus on their own thing sometimes. And the question is to you, and I understand that you both work in slightly different directions, but what are some ways that people can make organizations or their initiatives sustainable? Because that's a huge question that even Ukrainians are raising, because people have been volunteering their time and their efforts for almost a decade now, since 2014, and there are people coming in, taking the baton and moving forward. So do you have any tips or insights from your own experience, how to keep things sustainable?
I think that from my perspective, it's maybe I'm stating the obvious, but really getting people involved who really believe in the cause. And of course, to Sarah's point before, sometimes have people who actually have have some form of a connection to the cause, or relation to or have been a victim of the cause that they are trying to champion, etc. So I think that obviously, I think that's essential. I think that you should it's wrong to do volunteering for the sake of volunteering. Then I think that you do it because you feel you should, because you have this kind of drive to do it, because whatever that motivation might be. Because I think that volunteering needs to be authentic, and if it's only when it's authentic that is motivational, I think. So that's and I mean, I see it happening in a lot of organizations. I think that there is a much more of a kind of a commitment to these causes now than there was maybe a while ago. I'm just speaking from my own experience, but so I do think that, and I do think that people do feel that if they can contribute, if they can do something, that's what they should do. And you combine that kind of ethos with the personal commitment, the personal motivation, the personal drive that people have, then that's the best way to do it, I think.
Yeah, I think that heart and soul has to be there to be able to persevere. Listen, work, I say this repeatedly, it's a marathon with sprints mixed in. We talk about this a lot, not just within this work, but in NGO world in general, how to have them be sustainable, how to have our work in crisis situations be sustainable. My best friend from college used to say to me, you can't save the world if you don't get any sleep. And that doesn't mean that there aren't sleepless nights. That doesn't mean that we don't have a good cry, that if I'm looking through the database, I'm not going to have a moment and break down and take a few before I can get my act together and take action on what I know I need to do based on that. I think it's very challenging, Lucy, and I'm grateful for this question, because after over a year of this particular full-scale invasion, yes, it's been since 2014 and a bit earlier that Ukraine has been facing this in such a huge way on their soil, the exhaustion level is real. And so how do you take care of your volunteer teams? How do you personally volunteer within what you're able to do, and be realistic? Is it 20 minutes? Is it 2 hours? Is it a $5 donation every month? All of that matters. All of that counts. All of it contributes to being able to keep these causes going, to be able to supporting teams. So for Dattalion, we would love more volunteers. We also need funding to continue to maintain our database. It does cost money. Doing this work costs money. People need to be paid to be able to feed their families, to be able to take care of basic necessities. Those are realities within which we live, right? So I think, doing that by spreading the word of being able to even get small contributions into organizations, being able to cross-pollinate is hugely important, for our sustainability as organizations and groups to work together and support each other in that way and carry the load together, I think is essential right now. This is a very much a together situation, and to be able to promote each other individually within that. So yeah, it's challenging. There's no way around that. It's absolutely challenging, and you have to find your way through, and you have to sleep when you can, and you have to powerhouse through when you need to, and you need to reach out to your community and contribute financially where you can.
Super, thanks so much. Yeah, Izzy, hop on.
I actually really want to push on this, because this is such an important discussion, especially for the people who care a lot, and maybe they are doing a lot of volunteer work, dealing with and a lot of different situations, where I'd love to hear from all three of you whether it's for you personally or as a leader, how you take care of your volunteers, if there are specific tangible examples of what you do to keep tabs on your personal or your team's sort of energy level and needs, and what are the steps you take to make sure that people don't burn out, that you don't burn out, that your team doesn't burn out. Because I feel like there's also so much sense of guilt, like, oh, if I don't do one more thing, others are working so hard. So I'm curious if you have some tangible examples to give people who are dealing with the same situation some permission on, oh, okay, maybe I should listen. These are little things I could do to make sure me or my team are in touch with how we're feeling and taking care of ourselves so we could keep fighting and keep going.
Sarah, you want to take that?
Sure. Absolutely. It made me think, Izzy, about early on last year when we were really getting this going and pulling the team together, and I would be up, and I still am up at various hours of the night, depending. We have team literally around the world, so timing can be challenging, but there were frequent, very much late nights, 3 a.m., 4 a.m., and my husband said to me, Sarah, this is not sustainable. And I said, I know, but right now we're in the sprint. Okay, so sometimes you are in that sprint and you push and it's hard, and you do have to be aware of when it's time to take a break, when you need to rest your muscles, when you need to get a sip of water. And remember that it is a marathon with sprints in between. And I think part of, that sense of guilt, Izzy, that you mentioned, of knowing that you have an entire community working on this. None of us are doing this alone. And I think, to me, that has been huge. Knowing that I'm not facing this alone, that if I'm having, a hard time and I need to take a minute, I can pass it off to my team. I can reach out to another organization. I can ask for support in areas that I don't feel strong in. And I think that that's really important too, is reaching out to the incredible community that we have to bring everybody's strengths together, and be able to have that network, because burnout is real. And when you get to that point, it really is important to take a break, and continue connecting how you can, and jump back in when you're feeling rejuvenated and ready. So you can't save the world if you don't get any sleep.
Absolutely agree with that.
I mean, I would say, obviously whatever the situation that, Sarah's team is in and working, it's, because we're in very close contact, it's projected to us. So, that kind of, again, the energy, the despair, the whatever it is projected to us. And that's motivational to keep going, because, like I said before, it can feel slightly frustrating to sit, slightly removed, and you want to do more, and what can you do, etc. So being able to be very close by and again, supporting and working with whatever it is that is needed at the time, that's what keeps people going. That's what keeps the motivation going. And of course, you continue to see the horrors in the media, and then that, in a bizarre way, kind of spurs you on to say, well, okay, well, this is what we do and what we do, and we are one part of that wider community that is trying to put an end to this, and that in itself is continuously motivating and rewarding.
Thank you so much, Michael. We actually have a question from the audience from Helen, and I think it touches a little bit on what you find rewarding and what helps you to go forward. So Helen asks, you're bringing human faces to the stories of war. If you had to identify just one story of resilience that you've encountered in Dattalion's database, what would it be?
Want me to take that one first, Michael? I am having a very difficult time with this question, mainly because One of the ways that I have worked with Dattalion, I don't work directly on the database. I work more on, the organizational management stuff and advocacy, outreach, and creating these events to connect people. And so I don't see them before they come into the database, and then I'm reading them, or then we have an eyewitness that gets onto a virtual call with congressional leaders and talks about how they gathered themselves, their child, left their partner, left their home, made it through quite literally things that those of us not in war zones cannot even imagine. Cars exploding in front of them. And they get through to a place that they feel safe, and they get on a virtual call with a congressional leader here in the US, in the UK, somewhere abroad, and they tell their story. That to me speaks so much of the resilience. I'm sorry, Helen, I cannot pick one, but every single eyewitness account in our database is a story of such incredible resilience, and then how they continue to share their story despite how traumatic it is, despite re-traumatizing themselves telling the story and reliving it as they're telling it. That to me is the resilience and power behind these personal stories, which I'm simply a conduit for. These are not my stories. And to be able to do that, I find so incredibly powerful, and I'm so humbled to be able to do that and to channel their resilience.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. It's very difficult to pick one, because you spend some time looking through these images and you go, it's hard viewing, and each one of those images in their own right tells its own story that deserves to be told. And that's the, I guess the influence of the database. It is that it is so powerful in its raw imagery, this unfiltered lens of the reality of the war. That's every picture is its own story that it deserves to be told.
Absolutely. Thank you, Michael and Sarah. I would love to talk about the database actually a little bit more, because that is the basis of Dattalion, is the data battalion, collecting eyewitness reports, evidence of personal experience, and in some cases, evidence of war crimes that are occurring right now in Ukraine. Usually when there is any kind of media project, it's very tailored to the audience, to the target audience who will be reading this. And Sarah, you mentioned a little bit about how you were developing the user friendliness of this database just for these stories to be accessible. So I guess my question is to both of you is, how did actually the database develop in the form that it exists now? And how is the information as collected used forward? And was there a target audience in mind at all for the messaging and how the stories were presented?
Yeah, I think that's more for you, Sarah.
Yeah, absolutely. I can jump in, and then Michael can share a little bit about targeting and how we pull on some of these resources to keep Ukraine in the forefront of people's minds and keep the realities of what is happening in Ukraine out in the world. So the database came together extremely rapidly within the first few days of the war. It's based on Google platform, and has really been completely open source. Anyone can access it. We do not charge a fee. It's free. We wanted this to be a resource for everyone, quite literally. This is an archived, think of it as a virtual digital library of events, stories, images that have happened during this war that can be used as a resource. So, we ourselves do not document war crimes. We work with teams that know how to do that are specialists in doing that these stories are accessible to not only media, but to anyone. Anyone can go onto our website and click on the eyewitness database and read through those eyewitnesses. They are, we are very aware of privacy, so they are done in a manner that does not disclose names or identity. And I think that, as we've gone through and with our volunteer base, it's something that we are in the process right now of figuring out how to upgrade, how to make it searchable, especially as this war has gone on. When the database started, no one who was working on it expected to be doing this over a year later. We thought, okay, 3 weeks. Okay, we're gonna document this. We're gonna push, in congressional offices and show these images. We're gonna share this with media. We're gonna share this with the world. And here we are, continuing this marathon and saying, okay, we have this incredible database. We've now had wonderful, again, reaching out to our community of collaborating organizations, wonderful organizations come and say, hey, we can help you with this. We can help you update this so it's more accessible, more searchable, more usable. So that's the direction we're going in right now, but it's on the website. It's free. It's accessible. There's the video and image database. There's the personal eyewitness accounts database. And then there's a page for business witnesses, which is a large project we did documenting how this has impacted businesses with images of how it's damaged their businesses and their stories of resilience. So.
Yeah, and I think that again, obviously one of the themes of the talk today is digital storytelling, and images has got that very, very powerful impact on people's emotions, much more so than text. So that from the beginning has been a critical part of the storytelling, is to say it's a little bit like this image doesn't need any introduction. This is what it is. And it's the raw reality. That has been very powerful, and obviously in today's world of deep fakes and misinformation, etc., it becomes even more important to be able to say, well, this is genuine. This is someone's story. This is an image that it hasn't been manipulated. This is the raw truth. And now that becomes even more important today. So I think that has got an emotional, an intellectual impact on people. It makes people react. It makes people take action, and that's the heart of the storytelling. It's that imagery. Regardless, I think it's one of these things that transcends language, culture, geographical borders. Is that image has the same impact on pretty much anyone who sees it, which is why you're talking about this kind of borderless storytelling. It is what it is. You see it what it is. It's horrific. It is emotional. It is authentic. It is genuine. This is what it is, regardless of where you're from. So that has got a real impact on storytelling.
Yeah, it's very interesting that you mentioned this, Michael, that this is such a borderless depiction of a real human experience and a very raw experience. And for you, Sarah, also what you saw, it resonated so deeply with your own family history. And perhaps this is one of the reasons why Ukraine has remained in a focus in a way that countries in prolonged conflicts have not necessarily been before. It's because there are so many points that people can relate to from their own stories, and they're just everyday people across all of these different cultures and across all of these different countries. At least that is what I'm seeing. Would that be your professional assessment, Michael? I don't know, as a communications expert.
Yeah, I'd agree. Yeah, I'd agree. I think that is like I said. I think that there are certain things that I don't know. Like I said, transcends judgment. There are certain things that it's that kind of instant reaction you get on something, and that's why we talk about this concept of, or I anyways refer to it as this borderless thing, because I think that people are human beings. They react to tragedy and hope of human beings in similar ways, which is why I think that this is so powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that in terms of, and that's why I think we gravitated, and I personally, with a background in education, gravitated towards printing these images large and having that very direct in-person experience with that moment for someone else. I remember recently addressing a room of congressional and community members, and I had the image that was in my slide presentation that Byron Smith had of the couple at the border, and then right before the event was told that that the gentleman had passed at the front lines, had been murdered. And that, to me, when I was standing in front of that image, thank you, speaking, I mean, even now I'm getting teary-eyed. This is it. This is it for this couple. This is a real moment. This is a captured last moment. These are real people's lives. So that's an important through line in all of this, that this is a very human-based experience, and that we can all identify with it in some capacity. And I hope it inspires many more people to get involved in how they can within the capacity that they have.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And yes, we are heading to wrap up our conversation, and it's really been a pleasure to talk to both of you. My question would be towards the very end, if you have a call to action, or if perhaps over the last year that you've been doing this work, there has been a message or something that you would like the world to know about everything that has been going on.
I think for me, I come back to the point that I made earlier about apply your skills. Whatever you are trained in, whatever you are qualified to do, apply it to a cause somehow. Because, like I said, it's our experiences that we've been able to contribute in a fairly impactful way. And I've seen similar people, like I said before, with fundraising skills or teaching skills or medical skills or whatever it is, that as soon as you apply your skills, your experience, your know-how to a cause, it's priceless. So the more people who do that, the better.
And I'll jump in quickly and echo that. Share your skills, be adaptable. Being adaptable in this situation is really important, to be able to pivot and find ways to jump in. So be creative with your own self and what you have to offer and how you can share. Dattalion itself welcomes volunteers. Reach out to us directly. We're ready for you. We welcome you. We're looking forward to working with your skill set and finding a way for you to be involved. So thank you.
Thank you both. And Izzy, we'd love to hear from you. Any final remarks about today's conversation for our viewers?
I mean, I really just want to thank Sarah and Michael so much for the work that you do, for being here and sharing your experiences. But I also really want to thank the folks at America House Kiev. You guys have been doing this series so incredibly. There's Lucy here. We know there's Sasha behind the scenes. There is Maria, Tatiana, Andre. You all, have been working so hard to keep things going. So it's been such an honor working with you all. So thank you for all your work. Yeah.
Thank you, Izzy, and thank you so much, Kirsten, and to all of our organizers and supporters. This program definitely would not be possible without you bringing together Ukrainians and Americans, and also people from Europe. Michael joining us from the UK today. It's really been a privilege to have these conversations and keep having them. And we are looking forward to having more in the future. So please, everyone who joined us today, keep an eye out for future creative resilience in wartime sessions. And thank you again, Sarah and Michael. It's been a pleasure. Wishing everyone a peaceful and calm evening and day wherever you are. Have a good evening.
Thank you very much for having us. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.